Before we begin our third lecture in our ongoing lecture series, I would like to tell you a little bit about the Canadian Macedonian Place Historical Society. We are a non-profit, non-political organization. We are doing work in compiling historical, unbiased historical data on our Canadian Macedonian community, as well as the past histories of our people from antiquity to present. Our lecture today is on the Begalci, and that name was given to the people, to over 30,000 people, children that is, who were moved from Aegean Macedonia in 1948 and relocated in various countries such as Czechoslovakia, Poland, Hungary, Yugoslavia, Albania, USSR, and so on. In 1948, these children were relocated for a purpose, and we will find out about that purpose in today's lecture. At the end of the lecture, our forum is open to questions. For anyone who has any questions, we'll set up the mic over here to the right, to your left, and we will conclude with a draw for a few prizes for those who have filled the ballots for the draw. It is said that the first casualty of war is the truth. The Persian Gulf War clearly showed that the truth about the war was withheld. If the first casualty of war is the truth, then the second is the children. Thousands of children died and are continuing to die today in Iraq, even a year after that war. We have also been able to witness the ravages of war in Bosnia-Herzegovina and the relocation of thousands of children there in their killing fields. Where will these children go? Will they be in good hands? Will they be returned to their homeland when the hostilities cease? Will they be relocated with their families? What will happen to all those orphans? This is a tragic time for those children, and many like them in similar situations all over the world. In order to acquire a better understanding of the two casualties of war, the truth and the children, we can turn to the past and learn from what occurred in Aegean Macedonia. In 1948, Aegean Macedonians suffered both casualties. The first casualty was the truth about the Aegean Macedonians and their struggle for freedom. The second was the casualty of the tens of thousands of Aegean Macedonian children being caught in the crossfire of war. Today we are fortunate to have with us speakers from the Canadian Association of Refugee Children from Aegean Macedonia, who will share with us the events of their traumatic flight. I would now like to introduce to you our first speaker, who will be giving you a historical background leading to 1948 and the relocation of these over 30,000 children. I'd like to introduce now Mr. George Bukowski.
Simply speak about the refugee children from Aegean Macedonia is impossible without going back to the bloody partition of Macedonia. This division of the living body of the Macedonian nation happened after the two Balkan Wars, and it was finalized by the peace treaty in Bucharest in 1913. But the most tragic moment in the history of the Macedonian people happened at the time of the Paris Peace Treaty in 1919, after the First World War. At the time when the old feudal empires like Turkey, Austria, and Russia were breaking down and new countries were born, when freedom was given to nations that had lasted long ago, the propositions for an independent Macedonia were rejected under the pressure of the countries that had divided Macedonia. Greece, Serbia, and Bulgaria were successful in pressing false documents and data about Macedonia and its people. With lavish dinners and expensive gifts, they were buying the services of powerful bureaucrats within the League of Nations. These disgraceful facts were described by the bureaucrats in their own memoirs. When the wind of freedom and the right to self-determination reached most of the European nations, when the feeling of respect and justice was finding new and fertile ground in the old continent, when cooperation and good neighborly relations were established between countries, one of the oldest nations and countries in the world fell under even worse slavery. 51.5% of Macedonian territory ended up under Greek occupation, 37.5% under Serbia, 10% under Bulgaria, and the remainder in Albania. The League of Nations, under Section 51, subsection 9, paragraph 46, had guaranteed the rights of the Macedonians in all these countries. However, their rights were never honored. Aegean Macedonia, or as many call it Primorska or Belomorska Macedonia, found itself under the most inhuman conditions. Greece was obligated to give the Macedonians freedom to use and be educated in Macedonian language, freedom of religion and the right to their own churches, the freedom to observe their own culture and customs, as well as open borders between all parts of Macedonia. None of the above were ever implemented. Instead, they started the process of denationalization and genocide. Agreements were signed between different governments, and Macedonians were forced to leave their homeland, and in their place, non-Macedonians were settled. This especially intensified after the Greco-Turkish War, which Greece started and lost in 1922. Hundreds of thousands of Turks, Armenians, Jews, and Greeks were settled in Macedonia, and almost an equivalent number of Macedonians were forcefully relocated to Bulgaria, Serbia, and Turkey. Some Macedonians migrated to Canada, the United States, and Australia. Terror was the main weapon to use to achieve this end. Macedonian homes were burned, their daughters and wives were raped, and if that didn't work, they were just murdered. No part of Aegean Macedonia was spared, but the regions of Kukush, Solun, and Drama suffered the most. All of this was carried out by police, army units, and variety of bandits under the instructions and protections of the Greek government. No one should forget that the Greek Orthodox Church had blessed all those atrocities over the innocent Macedonian people. The church was preaching Christianity, but in reality was doing the same as every other Greek institution, and was far from God's gospel. It was a tool of the Greek nationalism as it is today. Under international pressure, the League of Nations, itself torn by internal quarrels, requested from the Greek government to implement Macedonian language in the school system. Because of that, in 1925, the Greek government issued the so-called abecedar in Macedonian language using the Latin alphabet. This lasted for only 1.5 months, when it was withdrawn by the government in Athens. With General Pangalos coming to power, the situation in Aegean Macedonia worsened. In order to prove to the rest of the world how much Macedonia was Greece, they changed all the geographical names to Greek names. For example, my village Pozdivica became Halara. The same thing happened to Macedonian family names. Popov or Popovski became Papadopoulos. My name was changed from Plukov to Plukas. In 1924, a French journalist traveled through Macedonia and he reported to the French press, "It is shame for all humanity that in the 20th century, an 80-year-old old man on his deathbed could not ask for God's forgiveness in his native tongue, because the priest did not speak Macedonian and the old man did not speak Greek." That was the kind of religious freedom practiced in Greece at that time, and it still exists today. The worst was yet to come with the dictatorship of General Metaxas in 1936. The Greek fascist Phalangia started to enforce the Greek nationalism and recreate the dream of big Greece. The Macedonian language was officially forbidden in public and even in the privacy of people's homes. This law is still in power today. Government agents would eavesdrop outside of people's homes in order to obtain any information that would be of interest to them or to just hear someone speaking in Macedonian. If caught, the lucky ones would be punished by paying a fine or being beaten. If you were not one of the lucky ones, you would be thrown in jail, beaten to death or shot to death. Only the boldest had the courage to speak in Macedonian to their children in the privacy of their homes. In schools, the children were taught that their grandparents and parents spoke the language of the gypsies and that it was disgraceful to speak it. Not even the old people were exempted. Up to the age of 80, they were forced to attend night school to learn the Greek language. The Greek paranoia went so far that it was against the law to speak Macedonian to farm animals. Animals that could not understand any other commands but in Macedonian. A farmer from the village of Besvina was brought before the courts because he spoke to his donkey in a foreign language. He explained that the donkey should be punished instead of him, because after 15 years, the stubborn donkey refused to learn Greek. Police officers were acting under their own free will. They were not held accountable for their actions. There was no judicial system to support and defend the innocent citizens of Macedonian nationality. When the Italo-Greek War started in October of 1940 and the Second World War with Germany in June 1941, the jails were filled with Macedonians. Thousands of Macedonian people were sent to concentration camps located on the lifeless Greek islands, or they were deported to deserted areas in Greece without any official hearing, court ruling, or sentence. Even under such tremendous terror, when under German and Bulgarian occupation, the Macedonians joined arms with all other anti-Nazi and pro-democratic people. They formed their own army units and joined ranks with the Greek political anti-fascist organizations EAM and its army wing ELAS. Thousands of Macedonian sons and daughters gave their lives on the altar of freedom, believing that if the war was won and Greece was free, they would enjoy the same rights and freedoms as any other citizen of Greece. Unfortunately, this never happened. At the time when German war criminals and their collaborators were brought to justice and were locked up in jails, at the time when they were hunted and prosecuted all over the world, in Greece, the neo-Nazi nationalists were having their best times. Activists and leaders of pro-democratic movements were liquidated. Once more, jails started swelling with all of those who were in their way. Ruthlessness, despotism, inhumanity, burning and murdering was an everyday occurrence. Thousands of native Macedonians were fleeing to wherever they could to save their own lives and those of their families. The Macedonians were paying a penalty for being non-Greeks and being a part of a country they never wanted to be. They became a minority in their own land without any basic rights. The difference this time was only that all the atrocities were not being committed by the German and Bulgarian occupational armies, but by the government who should have protected them as its own citizens. In 1946, when the guerrilla war under the leadership of the Communist Party of Greece erupted, the Macedonians from Aegean Macedonia joined it. They did this not because of the need for social changes, as the communist ideologues were claiming, but because they had no other alternative against the ethnic cleansing, the denationalization, genocide, lack of human rights. Their pure physical survival was in question. Only Greek chauvinism can be blamed for what happened. It could not be worse than it already was, because those chauvinistic forces had used everything in the devil's catalog against the Macedonian people. On the other hand, to get the Macedonians on their side, the Communistic Party of Greece promised equality and recognition of their distinctiveness. Instantly, Macedonian schools were opened. For the first time, Macedonian children learned the language and the history of their ancestors and the geography of their homeland. Courses were established to produce teachers to fulfill this need. Once more, they could be proud that they were descendants of a great nation with even greater cultural achievement, a nation that spread Christianity and literacy among the Slavic people. Almost all of the war operations and fighting was happening on Macedonian territory along with its atrocities. Special government troops were going from town to town, village to village, raping, murdering, and robbing innocent people, leaving behind only death and desecration. Many times a whole village was burned to the ground and its citizens killed or sent to concentration camps. In 1946, my father was one of those unlucky innocent people and was sent to a concentration camp called Macroniso. That death would have been better. If they could not accuse them of being guerrillas or communists, then they were the so-called Palyubulgari, and they treated them as national enemies. Many times sons were serving in the government army, while their fathers were being held in Greek jails for not being Greek by nationality. They meant by birth. Where the hand of those special units could not reach, heavy guns and airplanes were in place to do the destruction. Thousands of civilians were killed. No one was spared, not even women, children, or elderly. As a direct result of those actions, thousands of Macedonians were left homeless, and children found themselves orphans. This was the way Macedonian people paid for the deeds of the two Greek factions fighting for power. In short, those were the conditions and reasons why the columns of children and refugees left Macedonia, to save their lives. 95% of those children never returned to their homeland, and today they are treated by Greece as personas non grata. I can remember my mother and grandfather sending me, my brother and sister away, knowing that they would never see us again, realizing that this was the only way to ensure our survival. Sadly, 2 short months later, in one of the bombings of our village, both my mother and grandfather were killed. Thank you for listening.
The truth is powerful, isn't it? That's the first casualty of the Macedonian people. The second casualty is the children. And that brings us our second speaker, Mary Roshova, who will give us some information of the movement of these 30,000 children to their destinations north of Macedonia. Mary?
is one of the more exciting months of the year. March is one of the more exciting months of the year. The Mother Nature awakens from the long winter, especially in our beloved Macedonia, where the climate is warmer. It's a joy to hear the sound of a newborn lamb and see the arrival of the swallows. It's a sure sign of spring. It's also time for our rich traditions and rituals, Proštavanje and a Lenten period before Easter, one of the most important holidays in the Christian calendar. I'm sure many of you are familiar and more likely have received and worn martiki on March the 1st, a symbol for a good luck, good health, even a gift brought by the swallows or the stovichki. Unfortunately, none of these beautiful rituals and traditions were enjoyed or observed on March 1948. March 1948 remains one of the darkest months in the memories of all us that are the Begalci, our parents and grandparents. It is also one of the darkest periods in the history of the Macedonian people. Instead of the swallows, the daily flights were by the airplanes. On the beginning, they were just circling around to frighten and intimidate the population. Later on, the bombardment, the horror, and the destruction started. The normal daily routines of life, like the play of the children outside, the tending of sheep, or plowing the fields, were completely paralyzed. The people built bunkers, bunkers. It was just a hole in the ground, so they can hide from the air raids. One day a mother told her 5-6-year-old son, Riste, come here to hide. The poor, frightened little boy crossed by the nearby wall and said to her, Psst, they will hear us, pointing up at the plane. That's how low they were flying. The fear became unbearable, the destruction undescribable, as my friend Georgi explained. That month was adopted a humanitarian action, the children to be evacuated to safe places where are no bombardments. There were two main reasons for this action. First was to save the children from the horrors of the war, and second, to free their parents for the battle. The preparation began. In the villages, the village elders and the villagers themselves selected mothers and many single, reliable, and responsible females to be group leaders or group mothers. One of them was also my mother. Each group was composed of about 20 children ages 3 to 15 or somewhere 2 to 14 years old. The majority of the children were primarily from Macedonia, where was the center of the destruction, mainly from the regions of Kostur, Lerin, Voden, and also some Greek children from Epirus. It was around 28 to 30,000 children. The actual number was never officially acknowledged. Some villages like Armensko, Nevoleni, and others close to Lerin and Kostur, where the Burandares or the Greek monarchist army was, there were no bombardments and no evacuation. From the many interviews I did, the evacuation was recommended, encouraged, and above all, voluntary. In my village were few mothers that did not want to send their children, and no force was ever used. Probably there were some isolated cases that force maybe was used. It all depended on the individual, the organizer, if he was on a power trip. The evacuation was for every mother one of the hardest decisions of her life to make, a heartfelt dilemma. Should I? So what if I won't see them ever again? Shouldn't I? So what if they get killed or starve to death? I hope and pray God no mother ever on this earth is faced to make a decision like this. Sending her children, her own flesh and blood to an unknown journey and an unknown destiny. What alternative she had? After all, it was supposed to last only 5 to 6 months, maximum 1 year, not a lifetime. Around March the 20th, 1948, the mothers, Babas, prepared the food for their children, even though Lenten period, zelnik, pogacha, feta cheese, yagne, lamb, chicken, whatever they had, and fill up the torbi, their bags. Every evening the children with their mothers and relatives from all around villages gathered at the meeting place, Pregovo. I truly cannot find proper words to describe to you the emotions of the separation. A very sad, painful, and emotional scene. The children crying, holding tight to their mothers, the mothers, grandmas, grandfathers, hugging and squeezing them close to their bodies and sobbing, just like the lambs when they're weaned from their mothers. For some of them it was the last goodbye. I never saw my grandparents again. I was their first grandchild, their first happiness. What is the true hell? And chaos only. My heart goes to all the mothers of Yugoslavia in the present situation. So our journey began through Prespa, during the dark evening and night. As you can see, the children sat with their torbi on their backs, walking slowly. The tiny little feet wearing seems the only pigskin moccasins. They're sliding on the narrow mountain path. The earth was still frozen. The earth was still frozen somewhere. Other places were muddy and soaking. The clothing poor, not winterized. The older children were holding the younger one by hand or clothing, whatever they could grab. The youngest ones were carried by the oldest one in their arms or on their backs. Some were so tired that they were falling asleep on the road. The only light was from the moon above our heads. After reaching a nearby village whose children left the day earlier, we were accommodated in their homes, tired and exhausted from the long walk and the pains of the separation. We fell fast asleep. The following day, early in the morning, before sunrise, we were awakened and we had to go and hide into a nearby forest or a bush. We left our torbi with the food behind, with a promise that they will be brought to us later on. They never arrived. The day was too long, the conditions undescribable, cold, wet, hungry, crying, miserable. The airplanes all day circled above our heads. We could hear the bombardment and the guns in the distance. At the sundown, our march began again. As you can see here, we were assisted by the partisans carrying some of the younger ones in the oxen-pulled wagons. Here, sharing some water with the children. The words of hopes and energy, ušte malku, a bit further, were used frequently. Ušte malku will get bread. Ušte malku will reach the border. It was an exhausted feeling of never end to it. Finally, we crossed the border through very steep mountains. The border of what? Yugoslavia, Macedonia. The same land, the same country, the same people and a language. Country divided in 1913, as Georgi explained. Take a good look at the condition of these children, and especially the expression in their eyes. They tell everything, completely exhausted and worn out. There were also some casualties, children killed by the shrapnel from the bomb, few drowning, and some just died from the ordeal. We arrived in Dupeni and Ljubojno and were accommodated in the schools, homes, whatever was available. The villages were very poor, not much food, no electricity, no radio or news. Many did not know what was happening. At least we were safe and did not have to hide anymore from the airplane. children also in track, but from Korcha, Albania. They were the children from south of Kosovo that they had crossed the Albanian border first. In Bitola, we were assisted for the first time by the Red Cross. The children who were very sick were taken care of. There we stayed few hours or few days. As you can see, our journey continues again. This time by train, passenger, freight, even cattle wagons were used, whatever was available. Among these children on front are also two brave little heroines, the sisters Tranda and Menka, very active members of our committee. After the long and treacherous journey on foot, they are taking the first train ride in Bitola, supervised by the Red Cross, as you can see them further. Our next destination was Brailovo, located north of Prilep, between Bitola and Skopje. There we were gathered way too many children. The conditions were horrible. The food was very poor. Some of the older boys were stealing bread from the oven, the outdoor side. Many times it was not even baked. The hunger drives the person to desperate action. The accommodation was in school, barn, any available structure. The straw was the only substitute for blankets and mattresses. It was very, very cold, and we squeezed close to each other to keep warm, just like little mice. Up to this point, good or bad, we were always together with the same group as we left home, and the group mother. In Brailovo, after a few days, they started to separate us by age or whatever. They split the group and in most cases also separated the mother. Many children were only 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. They did not know their name, age, anything about themselves. That is why the mothers were sent with them. It was very irresponsible and cruel act. One of the mothers that I interviewed told me, it was Jani Fortuna, to Abuche ne izgori, that God burnt us. He was one of the leaders or main organizers. Fortuna means storm, and it was pseudonym that he used. She was separated from her children there until she was reunited with them here in Canada in 1969, after 21 years. It's a long, long time. The pains of a mother that cannot be forgotten. Here the children in the train from Brailovo are getting a refreshment on the railway station in Skopje. Here again, refreshment and some gifts. As you can see, we were always on the go. Buy food or transported from a place to a place. That is why the name Desata Begals. Verbally translated, the running children, the children on the run, were always on the go. When the train reached Novi Sad, just north of Belgrade, the wagons were railroaded to Bela Crkva, to Botica, Bulke, all in Yugoslavia, then Hungary, Romania, and Czechoslovakia. That is how one brother ended in Yugoslavia, the other in Hungary, sister in Czechoslovakia, and so on. We were 8 members from one family, and each one of us was in a different place. When we arrived at the various destinations, we were in a very bad shape. We had the same clothes that we left home, leg mistani in the same. So we got lice, skin rashes, mumps, measles, TB, tuberculosis, and other illnesses. There we were stripped, showered, and given a medical examination and fresh clothes. Here the children are getting haircuts, as you can see. After the haircut, they're getting some tasty sandwiches. Some needed to bandage the sore or broken ankle from the places for TB in the sanatorium. One of them here is our Georgi Plukovsky in the far corner over there in the middle. After a few months, some of the children from Bulgaria, Yugoslavia, I was one among them. We were transferred through Hungary and Czechoslovakia, where I was fortunate and I was reunited with my mother and my sister. Romania being one of the poorest countries, some children from there were transferred to Poland. In Czechoslovakia, we were divided into small groups by villages again and placed in children's homes. There we received an excellent care and we were recuperating from the difficult ordeal that was the summer of 1948. Here is one of the small groups reunited with their group mother from Brailova. Another group of little children enslaved, Kolo Mlinske, or a ring around the road. There is also my 5-year-old sister and a 4-year-old cousin on this picture. Just compare the faces of these children with the first pictures after crossing the border. What a difference the food and arrest can make. By the end of August 1948, the war back home not only that did not ease up, but became even more brutal and barbaric. The return back home soon, as our parents were hoping, became just a wish and a dream. So we were placed in a larger home with more children, like this one in Sinaia, Romania, and this one, Klokočov, Czechoslovakia, with 400 to 500 children to start the school year in September. Among the tiny heads, there is also mine. We were referred always as Greek children, even though the majority we were Macedonian. It was very puzzling for our Czech caregivers. How is it possible some children understand some Czech and others absolutely nothing? After all, mleko, mliko, milk, chleb, bread, voda, water, boli, with a herb, and so on. Then they found out all Greek was not all Greek, but also Macedonian. It's about time for the world today to find this too. On the beginning, we were taught in the home in the Macedonian and Greek languages only, hoping that one day we will return back home as an equal citizen in a free and democratic society. Unfortunately, that never materialized. Later on, we were assimilated in the school system of the host country. We learned their languages. For us, the Macedonians, in the many Slavic countries, it was a lot easier to grasp the language and culture. Deep in our hearts, we will be always grateful and thankful to this country. They accepted us in the most difficult times in our life and their life. They were in horrible conditions shortly after the war. From the West End, we got only negative propaganda, airplanes, and bombs. Hopefully the truth will be found in the nearby future so that people on Balkan can live in tolerance and understanding. More about the education of the children will explain my friend Haristo Karapeli.
The second casualty of war, the plight of the children. Well, what happened to these children when they could not come back to their homeland? What happened to them in their host countries? Chris Carafillo will explain to
one of the most devastating wars in Europe that left many countries in complete ruins. Their cities, towns and villages, factories and schools were destroyed. The people were still crawling out of the rubble of destruction, trying to rebuild their lives in a totally new political and economic order. They were facing the harsh realities of the post-war period with shortages in everything. These were more or less the conditions in the East European countries at the time we arrived there. For humanitarian and/or political reasons, we were taken away from our war-torn country into those countries which received us, sheltered, and opened up their doors to education for us. Never before in our history was given the opportunity to such a large number of Macedonian children to real education. We, the former children of refugees from the Aegean part of Macedonia, which were deprived of this basic right in our homeland by the Greek governments, did not waste this opportunity. We wanted to prove that we can not only work hard as farmers, our only designation under the Greek regime, but given the opportunity we can also study hard and learn to be whatever we wanted to be. But we also pretty soon came to realize that it's not going to be an easy task for us to accomplish. We had to overcome tremendous difficulties on our way. The not so distant past experiences of our lives were our constant companion. 8 years of war with all the atrocities and suffering that go with it. The tragic separation from our families and the departure from our natural environment to so many different countries at times was more than we could bear and left permanent scars in our young hearts and minds. We were in the crossroads of our life, and we were witnessing on our own the unfolding of one of the saddest events in our history. In midsummer of 1948, at the time when we were getting ready to begin our schools, the war back home was intensifying, and the Greek Democratic Army was running out of manpower due to large casualties. Then, by the authorities of the temporary government, some 1,200 children at the age of 14 to 15 years old were mobilized and sent back to the battlefields. Physically undeveloped, with very little or not military training at all, we were put in the front lines to fight the well-trained and equipped government army. As a result, hundreds killed, wounded, captured, and executed or thrown into prisons for life. For the very lucky ones that survived this terrible ordeal, after the Civil War was over in late 1949, we returned to those countries to rejoin our friends. Due to the economic difficulties and shortages that those countries were experiencing at the time, many of us at times went hungry and not always had adequate clothing and living accommodations. We had to learn the language of the country we were in and get accustomed to the new and very different conditions. Those were some of the major problems we had to cope with in our everyday life. Despite all this, however, we did not disappoint the generous people of those countries and the expectations of our people. We wanted to learn, and we devoted a great deal of time and effort to learning because we realized that we have to go on and prepare ourselves for the next step in our lives. After completing our basic schooling with very good results, we went on to further our education. By then, we had gained our confidence and believed that we can succeed. We entered almost all the schools and learning institutions those countries had to offer. With zeal and determination, we competed between ourselves and with the best of those countries, and we were winning. And at the end of a long struggle, hard work, and countless self-denials, the results were astonishing. Thousands of highly qualified workers for all sectors of the economy, hundreds of technicians, teachers, engineers, architects and doctors, many accountants, economists, musicians, artists, and more. In this relatively short period of time, we had accomplished a great deal, and we were proud of it. Despite of our work, however, and the unselfish efforts of those countries that tried to help us in those difficult times for us, our progress was hampered by the indiscriminate at times actions of the Greek Communist Party, which was independently active in those countries at that time. They had transformed our schools into army camps. Mostly fenced and protected from the outside world, we always had to get a special permit, usually on Sundays, in order to go and visit a relative or a friend. Our sport and recreational activities like school dances, etc., were planned and supervised by the Big Brother. For a period of time, our mail was censored on a regular basis. In the period following the end of the Civil War, our hard-won rights gradually began to shrink. The oppressive and discriminatory practices were all but too obvious. Although the overwhelming majority of the children were of Macedonian background, the activity language in the schools was Greek, and we were forced to use the Greek version of our names. They expelled some of our best Macedonian language instructors and students that dared to speak against their practices, branding them as Tito's agents. Some of them even mysteriously lost their lives. They did not care much about the children's welfare. They had one thing in their mind, and that is to make us as plain robots that will suit their future plans. We had to belong to the children's organization Pioneer or the Youth Epon, both controlled by the Communist Party. For them, the political indoctrination had first-rate priority in our education and spared nothing to achieve it. These conditions made us at times worried and apprehensive. Simply we could not believe that this was happening to us. But we were determined more than ever before to continue our journey. And our deepest desire was not only to survive this time, but to succeed and prosper. We wanted to prove to ourselves and to everyone else that we are inferior to no one. After completing our education, thousands of us joined the people of our respective host countries in all sectors of their economies. With honesty and dedication, we tried to help them rebuild and develop their countries. We also tried to repay a little part of our debt to them for sharing their countries and resources with us for so many years and for being there when we needed them the most. We wanted to say to them, thank you. Our efforts did not go unnoticed. Our achievements were recognized and our contributions appreciated. They could see that our efforts did not go to waste. In all this turbulent period in our life, which was marked with so many events and changes, far away from our country and our people, we never forgot our identity and purpose. It was imprinted in the back of our minds that our being here is temporary, and one day we will go and join the surviving members of our families, now scattered all over the world, because our towns and villages were destroyed and our people decimated. The first attempts for repatriation took place in 1951, mostly for children from the former Yugoslavia. Under the tremendous pressures from the Greek authorities, the parents of those children had to sign a declaration denouncing their Macedonian heritage. They were to state that they are Greeks. Some of those children were placed in trade schools hastily set up by the Greek government and in the care of the Greek queen for pure propaganda purposes. The majority of them went on to carry out our traditional tasks as farmers, served in the Greek army, and endure constant harassments and humiliation. To this day, they are being denied their basic human rights and privileges. From the year 1953 and on, many of those children refugees joined members of their families in the former Soviet Union. And there are many that fell victims to the very active at that time Bulgarian propaganda and ended up sharing similar fate with our colleagues in Greece. The majority of those former children refugees, however, returned to the present Republic of Macedonia and made very significant contributions to the economic, cultural, and political life in this part of Macedonia. And there is a great number of those former children refugees who still remain in their respective host countries with no place to go. Their parents killed in the battlefields or in their villages from the daily bombardments, or they never came back from the prisons and concentration camps in the Greek islands. These are the orphans of the civil war. But the youngest victims of that tragic period for the Macedonian people are the former children who were in their infancy at the time of separation, even to remember their own mothers. The nurses became their substitute mothers. The teachers and the caretakers in the kindergartens, their families. They were too young to remember their past, and with time, they disassociated with their natural families. Most of them today don't speak or understand our mother's tongue. For those of us that were fortunate to join our families and relatives in Canada, Australia, and the United States, consider ourselves very lucky. Once more, we had to start all over again, rebuilding our lives, learning the new language, and try to integrate into the Canadian society. By no means it was easy for us this time around either, but we wanted to make Canada our second country, the country of our choice, where we can raise our families and educate our children in peace and hope for a better future. Here we are given the opportunity to speak our language, preserve our heritage, and develop our culture. But by far the most important of all is the fact that our children and grandchildren don't have to go through what we have gone. And as parents today, we don't have to suffer the pain and agony our parents did in the past. Thank you. This is a group from Czechoslovakia. Due to the big reaction from the local authorities that they were opposed to the Greek authorities, to the communist Greek authorities, to mobilize those children and send them back home, they remained in Czechoslovakia and they were saved. And there is a group from Romania that did get mobilized together with children from the former Yugoslavia, and they were sent back. And there, as you see, young children loaded with equipment that they hardly could carry. And in the unit somewhere out there. And these are the children in those countries that were given the opportunity to study, to develop themselves as the normal children, as many other countries deserve to have it. And some of the graduates later on in the all sectors, as I mentioned before, of the local industries, trade schools, engineering schools, and whatever. And there is the children I was talking about, looking at a friendly face, but he doesn't recognize the mother or anybody he knew. Scared and hungry. And there is the first group departing to Australia to rejoin their families thereafter. It was possible to do so. Thank you very much.
Obviously a very traumatic event in the lives of these over 30,000 children and their plight through the mountains of Macedonia, to their plight of their host countries. Where are these children now? Obviously we've had the pleasure of hearing 3 of them so far with us here today. What are the rest doing? What is this organization or association doing here in Canada? And to let us know a little bit about that, Mr. Risto Chachkirovsky.
I would like to present to you a brief history of our Association of the Children Refugee from Aegean Macedonia. Everybody who follows the world politics of today is similar with the word refugee as a result of ethnic cleansing, most of the times in the war situations as in today Bosnia, some of the old Soviet republics, Belfast in Northern Ireland, and so on. This is not invented in our present time. As you have heard from our previous speakers, the Greek government have practiced it upon Aegean Macedonia and its people since the end of the Balkan War in 1913. The refugee are people who share the same fate, history, uprooted from their land and separated from their families, denied their basic human rights in their native homeland, thrown out without the right to return, etc. These are a few reasons, among many more, that make us different, one-of-a-kind people. People that understand each other. Suffering makes their relationship strong and lasting. Denial of their homeland makes them firm patriots and fighters for national freedom and basic human rights. We are this kind of people. Our association history begins in 1978. A few of us will get together when publishing the Macedonian newspaper Macedonian Voice. Inspired by the fact that we as Canadians enjoy all the rights in free and democratic Canada, we decided to get together, all of us, and give back to our society, ease our Macedonian people's suffering, and yes, contribute to free our beloved Macedonia. In order to reach all the children refugees throughout the world, we have organized similar associations as follows. In Australia, in 3 locations, Melbourne, Perth, and Adelaide. In the Republic of Macedonia, Czechoslovakia, Poland, and Hungary. Our goal is the national freedom for all the Macedonians in Greece, with all the basic human rights applicable equally to both Macedonian and Greek people. The members of our association get together from all over North America on our annual reunions held here in Toronto to discuss our past, enjoy the present, and plan for the future. Having lost our family ties in the past, and to prevent this from ever happening again, we organized our 1 annual family dance. Our association participates in all the activities in our Macedonian community. From our achievements, I would like to mention a few. Our association has accepted the challenge from Australia, conveyed twice by Mr. Salvino, to organize Macedonian Human Rights Committee for Canada. We have done so. We take a great deal of credit for sponsoring their first action, which is presenting our case in front of the European community. This was the first time Europe to officially hear complaints against the Greek government and the abuse of the human rights of the Macedonian people. Our biggest achievement was the 1988 World Reunion of the children refugees from the Aegean Macedonia in Skopje, the capital city of the Republic of Macedonia. This reunion was initiated by our association and in most parts organized by our association. Aside from its human values like bringing together families, relatives, friends from all over the world, this reunion is credited for waking up the Macedonian national pride and uniting all the Macedonian people, similar in effect to Russian glasnost and perestroika, leading to Macedonian Republic liberation from the communist and Serbian-dominated old Yugoslavia and creation of the free and independent Macedonian state. We remember the 1988 reunion in Skopje with pride and credit and great satisfaction for job well done. We have also successfully presented our case to all the levels of our government, including the Office of the Prime Minister, the Minister of External Affairs, and so on. I would like to conclude my presentation with the following thought. Unless the Greek society, in all their walks, forces the government to grant the Macedonian people all the national and basic human rights, there will be no future for Greece among the progressive and civilized countries. Where there is no justice for all, that society is stagnant or even backward. Today, Greece is characterized as bullying on the Balkans, and their quest to monopolize the name Macedonia brings them day by day more problems that they have bargained for. This presentation of our history stands to show you how false the word democracy sounds in the name democracy of Greece. Thank you. Here we have a picture of the monument that our association financed, and it's erected in the center in Skopje in front of the government building in the park named Women's Park, I believe.
Yep. Žena Park.
Women's Park. And it's like in the center, and I would just to remind you, if you follow the picture that we've shown, this is a motif from one of the pictures that we've sent previously, showing a mother with a bunch of kids presenting what we have done too. Thank you. And to finish it up, I would like, in the name of our association, to thank the Canadian Macedonian Historical Society for bringing up this very sensitive subject and testability to make a presentation and to get everybody acquainted with it more. And I thank you, the Canadian Association. Thank you.
We are now open for questions. We'll be setting up the mic right here to my right. So if anyone has any questions to ask our speakers, please feel free to come down and participate in this part of our lecture. Please feel free to come down and ask some questions. Is there anyone up there who would like to find out some more information or clarifications or maybe some information? Just come up to the mic, please.
I don't know if we need a mic to ask. I'd like to ask the refugee children a question that is authorities and say who they are and to get their naturally basic human rights in Macedonia that is occupied by Greece today. I don't know if it naturally takes money for all this, but I'm saying we have the truth behind us and to fight this, to go back home and or take Greece as a government or country to court. And I'm sure we will have a big result. We should take them to court, that's all. Thank you.
I believe Richard will come and answer that question.
Seems like the question is right and requires answers, but it's very difficult to answer. First of all, in order to bring the matter to an international court, which this is the court which will have the authority to pass the judgment. First of all, we cannot get to that court because we haven't got the rights to do that. In order to bring that matter to international court, one has to represent a government, a country, which we do not have, didn't have up to now. In order to rectify that, now what we are doing here is waiting for our Republic of Macedonia to get recognized, to get its independence, and we will pursue the matter further on. But there is another obstacle to that. There is the fact that up to now, we haven't been able to communicate with the Greek government to make any contact whatsoever. Nobody would listen to us here or want to see us. Example for that would be that we as a Canadian, with our Canadian passport, we tried to cross the border in '98 after the reunion, and we've been turned back, marked as a persona non grata or security risk for Greece. You know, children like myself, when I left 8 years old, I mean, there is no justice for that. There is no democracy in the Greek country, and there is no court that you could go to and have your right being respected and so on. So we are still hoping, and we are still fighting on that issue. We are not resting. We are trying to get it in many ways resolved, and that's what we are working. That's why we have our association to try and overcome all those difficulties, problems we have.
As children, when you went to these countries as refugees, are you now as adults permitted to go freely to Greece?
Well, I guess in a way asked your question. First of all, you have to be aware that returning to Greece, there is one big obstacle. There is a law recently introduced by Greece, 1540, I believe. In order to return back, to go back or to leave, you have to declare yourself that you are Greek by birth. And in order to do that, you need to denounce your nationality, okay? And even if you would like to make that kind of a sacrifice, you still cannot get, I mean, situation is set such a way that there is no way to get. For example, in order to get, you would need documents traveling, and in order to do that, you need to get a birth certificate. Once you are Macedonian, and regardless of that, whether you are carry a Greek name or Macedonian name, you are branded, you are marked in their evidence that you are a Slavic, they are Macedonian, regardless of that. And you will never get a certificate. Officials, they will never send to you. Even though they say, okay, you can return, but they always have back in their minds that people like us, once they call themselves Macedonians, they are national security enemy for Greece, and it's very, very difficult to do that. And certainly we are not willing to sacrifice our national belongings and the culture and so on. We got it to do that.
Are there any other questions?
Did I correctly understand that when the children went to the Eastern European countries, that they were first being educated in Macedonian, and then the Communist
be over soon, and we're going to come to a better country with a tolerance that both people have French and English. So we were hoping for a similar situation back in Greece when we're going to return. So that was kind of our dream, or even propaganda. So that's the way it was. We were learning the Macedonian and the Greek language. And eventually when the war ended in a tragic way as it did, so it was kind of no solution for us, and eventually we were assimilated into the school system of the country that we live. And I remember all the way from grade 4 and so on, then we were learning the Czech language and eventually Russian, but we still kept the Macedonian and even the Greek. And as a matter of fact, my Macedonian teacher is just sitting behind you, who was teaching me Macedonian then. Yeah.
I have another question to ask. When I was in Romania back in 1953, I met up with some of the Macedonians that were living in a village outside of Bucharest. And I know at that time they had an organization called Ilinden. And at that time they had told me that they were in contact with the Ilinden organization in Poland. I would like to know if this organization continued in these Eastern European countries, because I know that there are still Macedonians living in those countries, whether they've still kept this contact or whether they have been assimilated in the countries that they are living in.
Well, with the Ilinden, I don't know much if it's still continuing, but as Risto mentioned, in the last few years, there are formed a lot of these associations of the refugee children that we were, and that they are keeping still in contact. And with today's changes, in the Balkans, because just before Greece entered the European community, wanted to enter in 1992, so they were going again into those countries, like the Eastern European countries, and they were forcing the propaganda to the government, like in Czechoslovakia, Poland, Hungary, Romania, that the people who left in 1948, that they were Greeks. And even they started pushing that propaganda just in the late 80s, so they can enter kind of with a clear face into the European community. So our people, like the Macedonian people, they stood up and they say, no one is going to change, like in the 30s and in the 20s, what was happening in Greece, because these are already grown-up people, they're educated people, and to deny your identity is to deny your being as a human being. So that's why I think that even with all these actions, you always have a reaction, and the reaction lately from our people is coming stronger and stronger and stronger.
I believe we have one more question, and
well, I'd like to thank you very much for allowing me to speak here. My name is Paul Manoff, and I'm Canadian of Macedonian descent. I find that this presentation has been very, very interesting and very informative. It has prompted me to ask many questions, and I hope that you'll bear with me. First question I have is there a difference in, shall we say, classification of the word legality for those Macedonians who left Greece and who remained in Yugoslavia, as opposed to those who went to Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and Poland, and Romania? I know many Macedonians here in Toronto, and I get the feeling that those people who call themselves legality are those who grew up in Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Poland, and Romania, as opposed to those who grew up in Yugoslavia. Is there a difference in classification?
No.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know, for the benefit of everybody, I don't know if you can hear me, I can explain like that. Yeah, right, okay. There is no difference in classification. It's a bit difficult to explain. The name, as Mary did when she was speaking up, that's when the name is coming. The name is very tightly connected with our sufferings, and the same name goes for the people of legality in the Republic of Macedonia. As a matter of fact, the the moment, the strongest association of our kind, which we are cooperating, is in the Association of the Children Refugee in Skopje, Macedonia, which they gathers the people like us in Skopje. So there is no difference. Sometimes linguistic interpretation could be different, but that's not an obstacle.
Second question I have here, because events are changing so quickly today in Europe, what countries have now officially recognized Macedonia?
Well, I wouldn't be the authority, but please, I'll try to answer that. If anybody has a better information, I'll just please do so. First of all, the countries that started the recognition of Macedonia are the two sister republics in old Yugoslavia. That's Croatia and Slovenia. They have recognized Macedonia, as well as Bosnia. That's in Yugoslavia, in old Yugoslavia. Beyond the borders of today's Republic of Macedonia, we have Turkey and Bulgaria. They have first responded to Macedonian government plea for recognition. They have responded to it. Beyond that point, many different times, but it happened. It started, I think, the Philippines. They have recognized Macedonia. Then from the old Russian republics, we have, obviously everybody knows that Russia recognized Macedonia, but I think it's Latvia and Estonia, one of those two republics in Baltic republics that they have recognized. And it's a talk, I didn't hear officially, but I think Belarusia is being. And then there is, I think Venezuela also recognized Macedonia, and there are many other indications. For example, we have indications that it would be recognized by many other countries. It's in the working, but officially the word didn't come out. And just about it.
Ukraine?
Ukraine is one of them. They promised, but they didn't deliver yet.
I know this is, the problem here in Canada, sometimes we lack information to find out about the events that are going on in Macedonia. And I have another question regarding name, which all of us are concerned with. Is there going to be another step or presentation to the EC for recognition of Macedonia as a country and admitted to the EC?
Obviously on the right track. First of all, the non-recognition of Macedonia at that time was a temporary measure. They had to make a decision at that time. They tried to, first of all, transfer the information, their decision, to the Republic of Macedonia and get the input back from the Macedonians to see their reaction, what it is. I mean, by all means, that is not a closed chapter. So that situation is ongoing. I think you've heard the latest conference, which was held in I think, England, 26, 28 August. It was discussed the subject of breaking up of Yugoslavia. The Macedonian question was again brought up, and it's still the permanent committee, which is now in Geneva, Switzerland. Permanently meaning its office is located there. They are working, I think, every day on it, and it's still the question ongoing. And the latest information that we have about the subject is that there is a big movement at the moment in the world. In particular, I would like to mention for those who don't know that the United States is having an unusual activity in that respect. There is a special U.S. government representative right now in Macedonia who looks into that with a commission. And it's happening because what's happening is, I don't know how many of you know that Greece entered a successful blockade at the moment on the border with the Macedonia, and they've done that to that degree. If you listen to the presentation, you should be aware that what's happening in Greece today. They have blocked the border, and the part of Greece that's suffering today the most is just Macedonia. You have to know that, because all the islands are down there, they have still their touristic activities, and they have some economic activities, but the suffering goes in Macedonia. By closing that border, just recently, 2 weeks ago, Greek government even refused to oblige American aid to Macedonia. It was in medication, and what they had to do is to travel by trucks all over through Hungary, Romania, and getting into Macedonia to Bulgaria. And that was one of the acts that actually makes the Americans to think twice. And I think they made that move And also, I think I heard lately that in England is the same similar movement. They try to enter into the discussion about the names, and they have even a proposal made up, but it's not published. It's still in the works. My answer to you, yes, it's still going on. The process is not finished yet.
If at the present time Greece is taking all these measures to blockade Macedonia, what is the present government doing today to make things, shall we say, difficult for any movement of Greek goods to the Central Europe and Western Europe? Are they entitled to blockade any movement of transport
These are
through
very.
Macedonia?
What are we going to talk politics here?
If I can just interrupt for a minute here, if we just listen to the news as it's ongoing today with the Balkans, these are very questions that don't really relate as much to the Bengalsi. They are very important questions for Macedonians, but I'd like to move on because our time is limited.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the questions. I believe we have one question, Rachel, coming our way. Tom Yana.
In 1936, I was fortunate enough, I'm a Canadian, born in Canada, to have gone to Macedonia. My mother took me there. And I'd like to ask the Bengalsi that I was in a little village of Tarna. That's in the Greek part that's occupied by Greece.
That's right.
And I want to know what have they done to our villages? Because when I was over there, even in 36, I remember the suppression of the Macedonian language in the schools, even though I was 10 years old. And as far as where I'm concerned, Greece is a fascist country, and still is fascist. Greece should not be in the United Nations. It should be kicked out because it's not democratic.
You're right.
Not only that, Greece has signed a declaration that they are democratic, and so is Bulgaria. And every one of them has broken their promise. And I understand that we can ask the United Nations to do an investigation, but we are doing nothing. Us Canadians should help the Bengalsi. I'm proud of the Bengalsi and will always stand behind them. Thank you.
Good.
Since you are from Terna and I'm from Terna, soon as the thing clears up now, we're gonna go and build a resort place over there at the Moro where the water is very cold, and we're gonna get the children who are desperate and need medical attention, whatever we'll need. I mean, it's not end to it. It's just a beginning. And believe me, it's coming on our way because the truth belongs to us. And you'll see Ternava as the other places is going to become a nice resort place, a mountain. We're going to have a lot of skiing over there. Ooh.
To conclude this lecture, I'd like to call the chairperson of the Canadian Macedonian Historical Society, Peter Conda.
Right, Peter.
I have the honor of really thanking everybody. But first and foremost, I want a great big hand for a wonderful job of chairing the evening. One person that has worked very, very hard, and the committee is not just one person, but it's many persons, but that is the chairperson of this particular committee, and she was responsible for making sure that this thing was organized in the very fashion that we see. And that is Virginia Evans. Virginia, take a seat.
Over there.
And of course, we must thank all three of our wonderful speakers. I think everybody was very, very impressed with their speakers, with how knowledgeable they were, and also on how well they made the presentation. Now, the role of the Historic Society is not just to present this to you, but I feel that what we have to do is we have to ask for this and document it and probably put it in some sort of a book so that it could be presented for later on. didn't say is Risto is one of the founders of the Begalsi. He was very instrumental in the whole episode that took place in Macedonia when the Begalsi were there. He was one of the main driving forces that made this thing possible. And if anything, that little statue that you saw there, I think was largely the result of Risto's initiative. And of course, when he talked about the Begalsi, we also have Mr. Pancharovsky, who was the first president of the Macedonian Human Rights. He's over there. And incidentally, while you're at it, I see the president of my own village from the Dunbensi. The only comment that I would have to make is we know that Dunbensi does not exist as far as Greece is concerned, and I would like to see them get more active too. In closing, the most effective thing that we have right now is not a political one, but one of just simply expressing and collecting the truth. And that truth is what is going to be giving the Macedonians their identity, and that truth is something that the Greeks cannot hide from. And it is important that each and every one of you become a part of the CMT Historic Society. We need your support, we need your money, we need your help. So please make sure that you give us the support and get your friends, get your relatives, get non-Macedonians as well. Thanks again to everybody that participated.
Thank you, Peter. I'd also like to thank the Fairview Library Theatre for allowing us to have this lecture. Right now, what I'd like to do is have the draw for the 3 prizes that we have for you, for those people who filled out the ballots. If we can have, actually I'll just go around for the first prize. We have dinner for 2 donated by the Macedonian Garden. And maybe if we can have Mary Roshova come pick that one up for us. Oh, the street is John Street, Ontario. Telephone number 638-4583. Kamovska. Okay, yes, I can't really read it that well. This person, we can have Georgi here.
That's very nice.
It looks like if Tumis, 42 Haddington. It's scribbled here, Tumis. Oh. Actually, everyone's scribbling here. Phone number is 489-7120. Is that a Rumi's? It's your mother. Okay. I believe the cookbook is up top there. And finally, a bottle of wine donated by Mary Constantine, one of our members of our lecture committee. Here's the name I can read. Donna Nicola, for the bottle of wine. Congratulations. I'd also like to inform everyone that this is an ongoing lecture series. Our next lecture is coming up November or December. We haven't finalized the date yet. But an important event that I was told that is occurring this month, October 24th, is it? Am I correct? The 22nd, the March of the Macedonian students downtown? November 22nd. So keep that in your calendar books. Again, the lecture we are having, the next one is a lecture with Professor Andy Rossos. We now have for you some coffee and donuts donated by Primrose. We have some books and articles for sale outside the door down here at the bottom to your right. I'd like to thank you again for coming out here and being with us. And keep informed. And again, as I said, the truth about any culture is something that rarely gets out. And I'm sure there's a lot of Macedonians here. It's up to each and every one of you to get out there and talk about our truth and inform people and educate them. Thank you very much again.